like to introduce David Seymour.
Well, thank you very much, Cam, for that kind introduction. Thank you, James, for visiting and sharing your thinking. I agreed with most of what you said, except for the bit about we have great cars in America. You got to try some European cars sometime. You know, one of the things you said that resonated with me is that Western democracies have lost their mojo. And the book that you sent, I think that explains why. Most of us would like to see universities as sources of enlightened thinking, but I think too often lately they've left people disappointed. The universities seem to resent the society that funds them, and their ideas seem to corrode rather than enlighten its values. That corrosive idea is that there are actually many realities, and your reality, it seems, depends on your identity. You'll hear them say, speaking as an XYZ person, they say that where you come from matters more than where you're going. And hidden in James's book is hope, because if you can define a problem, you can actually solve it. And the problem, I believe, is the lack of a shared reality. You see, the real world, it unites us. When we all muck in, with number 8 wire it seems, and we work on the same problems, we realise how much we actually all have in common. And today I'd like to show how we can not only solve New Zealand's number 1 problem, and others, we can do it with less finger pointing and more problem solving. Now, I want to start by talking about some of those tall poppies, and I didn't know James was going to say that. But there's some people here today that I'd like to thank. Starting with everyone here, you all put ACT MPs in government, and they're now delivering a wall of real change to address our country's problems. We heard from Brooke, Nicole, Andrew, Karen and Simon. They are hard-working heroes in government bringing about real, tangible changes to the policies of this country, and I thank all of you for the work that you do every day. But ex-caucus, though, is not just those who are ministers working directly with government departments on policy. Our feistiest and our savviest new MP couldn't be here today. We thought about putting up a pixelated picture, but Laura McClure's deepfake porn bill is an example of addressing an urgent need. And her campaign for that legislation has been reported right around the world. She has a huge future as an effective politician. I want to ask Paramjit, where are you, to stand up. Paramjit Parmar is our brainiest and hardest working parliamentarian. And every weekend, she's out there practicing hand-to-hand retail politics. Paramjit also has 3 science degrees and owns at least 1 export business. That is more than the entire Green Party combined. Cam Luxton, who you've seen all day, is our MC. Parliament's only licensed building practitioner and its most practical MP. His advocacy for sane liquor laws will succeed this term, and he's on track to give hunters a say in conservation for the first time. And then, now stand up all the way, ACT's own pocket battleship, our whip, Todd Stevenson. Now, Todd's executive experience looking after our caucus and our parliamentary operations is invaluable. But he's also picking up the end-of-life choice baton to give more control to more people over how they go and when they go if they're suffering badly. And many people, I'm sure, one day will be thanking Todd for that. And last, but most definitely not least, his kidneys may only be giving 5%, but the rest of him is giving 200. Give it up for Mark Cameron. The authentic voice of rural New Zealand has pulled off an extraordinary feat. Very few government backbenchers remain nationally visible, but Mark remains at the forefront of every rural debate, and I'm sure James Lindsay will be interested to know that he recently had a viral video that involved him tying up a fence post with number 8 wire. These MPs and the ministers you've heard from are supported by an excellent staff in Wellington, in our electorate offices in Epsom and Tamaki, and in the party office. And they, in turn, are supported by you. I'd like to thank all of our volunteers. I met a volunteer at this event this morning who travelled from Nelson with all the challenges they're having there to help work making this conference today, what it is today. There's our donors, our Activate committees, and every person who gets out and practices hand-to-hand retail politics, pushing a vision of a free and equal society. To all of you, I thank you. It is a joy and a pleasure to lead this party. And I know that you all have something in common. You know that tall poppy syndrome doesn't build any homes, doesn't grow any businesses, create any jobs or raise any families. Tall poppy syndrome keeps everyone smaller. And if hard work, if courage and results, if they make you a tall poppy, I'm proud that X has a whole field of them to stand with, and James, we don't apologise for it. Finally, can I acknowledge nearly 50 New Zealanders who are standing for X local in their community's council elections this October. And I know there's at least some of them here because I've met them this morning. Stand up if you're standing for ACT Local. There we go. Thank you. Apparently all localised to the centre of the room. Councils, they don't just put up rates. Council bureaucracy, as we heard from Simon Court, puts up the price of everything everywhere. There's building a competing supermarket. It costs too much, and so do groceries as a result. But so do new houses, kids' swimming lessons. Council dysfunction can push up the price of anything. And so, who do you vote for to get common sense in your council? You get the little booklet, you haven't heard the names, so you tick someone, you choose the person who's going to disappoint you. A few years later, you ask yourself, is that even the one that I ticked? The advantage of ticking an ACT local candidate guarantees what you're getting. Someone who wants to cut out waste, to save your rates, to let you drive your car and park it near where you're trying to go, without dividing your community by when their ancestors arrived on these shores. If those values sound like yours, then I hope that you will support these candidates in your area. Thank you. Now, meanwhile, back in Wellington, central government, where incidentally I was listening to James talking about your problem is fixing your pipes. I mean, we have a living, breathing model of this in our capital city. The people do not have the right incentive to fix the pipes, I could assure you of that. It's time at halftime for a halftime report card on our government. Our ministers are making real change like we campaigned on, and we've heard of that. But we can also point to our influence beyond the portfolios that ACT ministers and Undersecretary holds. The government is spending a smaller share of the New Zealand economy each and every year across the forecast period of 4 years. And ACT's been at the forefront of saving the taxpayer money. Brooke's gutsy return of common sense to pay equity, i.e. making it about actual gender discrimination, is only the most obvious and fiscally significant example of that. And didn't she suffer some slings and arrows and fire them right back in that particular exchange? By the government taking a smaller share, there is more for your farm, more for your firm, more for your family. That is the logic of the government taking less. Then there's crime. And as we heard from Nicole McKee, we are reversing Labor's mistake of being kind to criminals and just waiting to see if maybe they'll be kind back. Instead of that, we're upholding innocent people's rights by giving criminals more consequences. With Act's 3 strikes, we're applying minimum sentences for repeat offenders. And all the rest, more prison space, less sentencing discounts. Violent crime as a result is coming down, and the values of our community are improving. And then there's this question of the third C. There's the cost of living, there's crime, there's co-governance, where we've removed the divisive Māori Health Authority, we've removed the co-govern 3 warders, we're putting Māori wards to the vote at council elections in October, we're delivering social services on the need of the individual, not their ancestry, and we're rebalancing the educational curriculum, including that pesky section 127 of the Education Act. Thank you. In short, the government is restoring the spirit of a country built on equal rights regardless of birth. Now, our partners, they abandoned us in defining the treaty principles, so we lost the vote, but we didn't lose the argument. In fact, there's something more important than winning the vote. We won the argument because nobody can explain why New Zealand is better off divided by ancestry, or why honouring the treaty requires racial division. And if they could, how is it possible that they forgot for 2 whole hours to make their arguments in the parliamentary debate? It's now a matter of time before the Treaty Principles Bill, or something like it, passes into law. Everyone here who stood for equal rights in the face of insanity and inanity can stand proud, because you have made it possible for New Zealand to find a better path, because a free society can only exist if someone puts the idea up in lights, and that's what you have all collectively made possible through your support of the ACT Party. Thank you very much for that unflinching support. Thank you. Now, there were 3 C's that preceded the election. I think there's now an H. On healthcare, we are putting productivity ahead of bureaucracy. Since 2018, the health budget has grown from 18 billion to 33 billion. And you might ask, where did the 83% increase go? It was wasted on endless restructures and ideology that didn't answer the simple question: how do you get more patients seen to faster, or better still, avoid them needing attention in the first place? Now we're increasing productivity at the patient level instead of management restructures to get the full value of that 83% increase. Vaccination rates up, wait times down, training more doctors, building more hospitals, funding new cancer medicines, and reforming Pharmac to actually listen. We're improving access to innovative medicines, and some older ones, that are taken for granted overseas. In each of these cases, the cost of living, co-governance, crime, health, it is too early to declare victory at half-time in a parliamentary term. It's certainly too early for a victory lap. But we can point to tangible action, in fact, a long list of tangible actions that have been taken and steadily improving results in each area. And has this coalition government gone as far as ACT would on each issue? No, it has not. But has it gone further than it would without the ACT Party? Time and again, you can be assured that your voice and your vote have made the future of this country freer, more equal and more prosperous than any other vote could have. And that's why ACT next year will be campaigning to keep this government, i.e. not the other guys, and make it better with more urgency, more reform, and a greater commitment to making New Zealanders free and equal. Is it, though, enough? I would say that we have come out of 6 years of a long trouble. In hindsight, March 15 began a period of endless upheaval in New Zealand. Prior to that, we had much happier and simpler times. The big issues of the day were things like, can John Key really convince us to vote for a tea towel as our national flag? Failing that, can he at least get some pandas for Wellington Zoo? In hindsight, they were much happier and simpler times. But since that terror attack, we have faced one upheaval after another. 10 months later, we heard about a place called Wuhan. Many of us for the first time, but will never forget it again. We never imagined that our own government would start acting like the one that we think of in that country. In many ways, we are still paying for COVID through the cascade of inflation, then high interest rates, and then recession and unemployment. And that cost of everything remains a key problem that people in New Zealand face. Yes, prices have stopped rising. We have crushed inflation. but prices have not gone back down. The 20% increase in the past 4 years are now baked in to the power bill, the weekly shop, and the price of everything you buy. The question is how we're going to deal with it. And that's where I come back to the work of James Lindsay. Those 6 years of long trouble has left us fatigued. Many people have been left angry and more open to blaming someone than usual. And the scourge of identity politics has left us even more primed than usual to point the finger at someone else. That postmodern disease has set New Zealanders against each other. The idea that our differences are greater than our similarities is a toxic belief. It makes it harder to solve real practical problems when you're busy finding reasons to resent a fellow New Zealander who's actually pretty much just like you. It's tangata whenua against tangata tiriti. It's boomer versus zoomer. It's wealthy against poor. It's urban against farmer. It's employer against employee. Tenant against landlord. And identity politics has a close cousin I call zero-sum thinking. Zero-sum thinking is perhaps the most dangerous frame of thinking that's affected Western society in these past 2 decades. It fits like a glove with identity politics because it's the idea that for you to do better, someone else must do worse. Now, this has happened because it's a deeply human response to divide the world into heroes and villains, people who do good and people who do bad. It's true that sometimes that does happen, but the reality is that most people, most of the time, are actually trying to make things work. And what's more, the success of one group, perhaps someone who's made 500 hammers, often benefits another. Peter Beck's genius has made him very rich, and good on him. But it's also ignited and given liftoff to a New Zealand space industry. When we lose the insight of positive sum thinking, we believe in zero sum and we become more divided, poorer, worse off politically, worse off culturally, and worse off economically. The reality is, there's only 5 million of us here. We all have far more in common than what separates us, and our success in New Zealand is interdependent. The problems that we all face are shared, and the solutions will only be visible if first we see that basic fact. I'll take just one example of how this goes wrong. You get identity politics and zero-sum thinking, and you don't solve a problem. Throughout the last government, there was a problem with high rents. In fact, this country has had, and still has, a problem with housing. We've got the best land in the world. It's practically empty, but somehow there's not enough habitat for humans. Now, being short of housing, it causes so many other problems. That's true. Students struggle at school when they move from auntie to uncle and one address to another every term. Young people can't see their own way to a property-owning democracy, and they despair. As we heard from Simon Court, they decide to either move to Australia or worse, stay here and vote Green. The government spends $5 billion per year on rental subsidies to make up for this dysfunctional market. And over the period of the previous government, the average rent rose from $400 to $590. So making more housing available and giving people a bit of hope that they could have a roof over their heads at an affordable price, that's a problem that's worth solving. It's a really big one. It's important. But what followed when Labor saw this problem coming up in lights on their focus group dashboard was a failure of leadership. Instead of pointing out that we face a common problem and we should join hands and solve it together, they instead decided to give their supporters a scapegoat. They decided that actually landlords were to blame, and I suspect they did it for a few reasons. Number one, politics. There's about 3 million voters and only 120,000 landlords. So for every landlord you beat up on, there's 23 people who might vote for you. They say that the most important skill in politics is the ability to count, and at least Labor had that. Number two, they have an asset. Many landlords are cash poor, but if they own an asset, they look like someone who can pay. And number three, they're the one collecting the rent. And so they may, even if they're collecting it to meet a bunch of other costs, it's easy to connect them and blame them for the price rises. So Labor taxed landlords more. Proud to say that ACT has restored mortgage interest deductibility. But from the time Labor removed it to the time we restored it, the average weekly rent rose over $100 before falling back again. Labor, though, weren't finished with landlords. They decided to change the Residential Tenancies Act to the point that landlords and tenants were almost co-owners in their property. A fixed-term tenancy would automatically roll over, and to evict, the onus was on the landlord to prove 3 incidents that transgressed the law. None of these policies actually worked. Rents still went up, and they went up because Labor failed to recognise that landlords and tenants face the same basic problem: the short supply and high cost of housing in New Zealand. Now, both sides really needed to reduce their costs, but zero-sum politics distracted everyone from their common goal. Since then, we've taken the tax off. We've laid out a program to get more housing built by analysing the problem and realising that landlords and tenants alike both wanted more homes built. High interest rates, too much tax, not enough supply, it all drives up costs. Landlords are funded by tenants, so the costs get passed on. Realising that we have more in common than what separates us is actually the starting point to solve problems. If everyone wanted more supply, then the test for good policy was, well, will this policy actually make it easier to build a house? Better resource consenting, better infrastructure funding, such as the replacement of 3 waters. It all means it's easier to get new buildings connected. Faster building consents and easier access to new building materials will mean more competition and lower prices to get stuff built. Now, these are concrete changes to policy designed to make it easier to build more houses. More supply makes for a better market and weekly rents actually falling. But this experience, you may be wondering if this is all what happened, why are you talking about this now? It's because it's a really good case study, and it tells us something about how to solve our problems. And it's a pattern, to borrow from James, that is universal. Scapegoating licensed firearms didn't make it safer. In fact, the opposite. Because the truth is that licensed firearm owners and the rest of us all want the same thing: the safe use of firearms and a legal framework that allows it. Scapegoating farmers hasn't made them better environmentalists, because the truth is, as Andrew alluded, farmers and the rest of us both want the same thing: to look after the land so it maintains its productive value. Scapegoating employers didn't increase real wages. The truth is that employers and employees both want to produce more so they can take more home. Banning oil and gas exploration didn't achieve anything except smashing the confidence of the world to invest in our country. Now, blaming someone might feel good, but we think that building something feels better. So whether you rent or you own, you farm or you teach, you build or you bartend, your future depends on solving the same problems instead of blaming different people. And today we turn to a different challenge. The biggest faced by New Zealanders is the cost of living. People are finding their dollar doesn't stretch too far anymore, but there's something else beside the price rises. There's that fatigue after the 6 years of long trouble, those short tempers that everyone feels. And you can understand people wanting to go after the banks or the supermarkets or the power companies, because like landlords, they're a very small percentage of voters, they appear to have money, and they're the ones who are collecting the money, so right in the firing line. And it would be the easiest thing in the world for me today to write and give a speech saying they're crooked and they need to be punished somehow, they should be taxed somehow, have their businesses broken up, or be watched over by even toothier watchdogs who really teach them a lesson. But that would be the curse of zero-sum thinking. And I know there's some political risk in me saying all of this. The good news is I'm basically impervious to political risk. People will pile on and say I'm defending big business or whatever, but political risks are part of leadership. We need a more collaborative approach. We need to ask ourselves how we address the shared challenge of getting time-sensitive products to a spread-out population living across a 1,500-kilometre mountain range. The right amount of stock to the right place at the right time at the right price. It's not easy, but at least we can acknowledge everyone wants the same thing. If only we could all realise that. The government has made a good start with its request for information that solicits more competition from foreign supermarkets. And this is something ACT's been saying for years. I was asked at the end of last year, how would ACT do it? And I said, quote, if it was my job, the first thing I'd do is ask some global supermarket chains, hey, why haven't you invested in New Zealand yet? Get the list of reasons they give, start ticking off the barriers we can remove. That's actually what's now happening. And there are more ideas to enhance competition waiting in the wings. We want to avoid the mistakes of envy and vengeance that didn't work getting rents down. We want to see competition and innovation to get those prices down. And here's 4 things I think the government should do towards the end of this year. Number 1, we've got to give people confidence. We've got to tell people it's safe to invest here. The only way we get better services is with more investment. If we want more of the right stuff to show up in the right quantity in the right place at the same time, there's going to have to be more stores, state-of-the-art supply chain management, new distribution centres, and all of that requires investment from people inside New Zealand and outside. We should state to the world that it's a safe place to invest here. Your property rights will be respected by a government that makes laws carefully. We won't be forcibly separating your business or forcing you to sell to your competitors. And if you doubt that, just ask the oil and gas industry happens when the government doesn't make laws carefully. Because when Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First pulled the rug out from them, we learnt a hard lesson. As Chris Liddell said in a recent speech, New Zealand needs foreign investment, but foreign investment doesn't need New Zealand. Now we have to use taxpayer money to show that the oil and gas industry that we're very sorry about all that, and here's a $200 million co-investment if you'll just come back, pretty please. That's the situation that we've found ourselves in as taxpayers due to irresponsible lawmaking. Number 2, we should level the playing field with multinationals. There's a grocery supply code that Labor put in place so that supermarkets would negotiate in good faith with their suppliers, but their suppliers don't have to negotiate in good faith with them. And the idea was to protect the orchardist in Central Otago or the strawberry grower in Pukekohe from the much larger and nastier supermarket. What they forgot is that most things on the shelves actually come from suppliers much bigger than supermarkets. If you think Woolworths is a big company, try Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble or Unilever. They also charge New Zealand supermarkets more than Australian ones. The New Zealand government should not stop our supermarkets from negotiating aggressively from multinational corporations, but that's exactly what the government currently does. The grocery supply code should be made two-way for dealing with foreign suppliers. And we should pass a fast-track omnibus bill that acts as a one-stop shop for any applicant who wants to build a chain of 10 or more supermarkets. One law should get their land zoned, their resource consents issued, overseas investment consents issued, and liquor licenses done automatically. Because at the moment, trying to get even one store set up can take 28 years. Who overseas is possibly going to consider opening a chain in this country? And as for the liquor licence, how much alcohol harm really comes from Mavis putting a Shiraz in the trolley at New World? Nothing would send a clearer signal that New Zealand is serious than a bespoke legislative welcome mat giving permission for, say, a Walmart or an Aldi or a Tesco to set up a whole chain in one country in one go. And I hope it'll bring a serious extra chain to retail in New Zealand. But even if it doesn't, just the possibility of a new competitor can keep competitive pressure on incumbents, and it will also show us that if no one comes, maybe we misdiagnosed the problem in the first place. Number 4, we should dump Labor's reforms. The Labor Party bet the farm on grocery industry reform. They even passed the grocery industry bill. They set up a grocery commissioner. They required endless monitoring and put millions of dollars a year in costs on the supermarkets and other retailers that are now paid by, well, you as the taxpayer for the enforcement and you as the customer for the compliance. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most of, if not all of the policies applicable to the grocery industry that we face today were put in place by the Labor government. So surely you would hear them raving about how successful their policies are in putting down the prices and making New Zealand more affordable. But instead you hear them constantly complaining that it's all terrible and the market is dysfunctional. Now, if a policy adds cost instead of saving us money, and not even the people that put the policy in place is prepared to defend it, in fact the opposite, then the policy could go and we can get rid of tens of millions of dollars of needless bureaucracy and cost straight away. Simple stuff. Finally, in conclusion, those are 4 practical steps the ACT Party advocates to save New Zealanders money, and all of them could be done by the end of this year. But really, it's just one policy in one area. There's a wider issue at play. It's about how we're going to solve our problems as a country and deliver the prosperity that keeps bringing people to these shores and prevent people from wanting to look offshore for their own and their family's future. If you're looking for finger pointing, don't look here. We in the ACT Party are interested in practical problem solving. If you want to find a scapegoat, you can for every problem, but it still won't work. We tried it with the landlords, we tried it with oil and gas, we tried it with farmers, employers, licensed firearm owners. Every time the government goes after a group in society, the problem gets worse. Because as James Reed would sing, actually, we're all connected now. With the cost of living, the solution is not regulation. The solution is competition. A business in New Zealand should fear their competitors, not their own government. It's in that wider lesson that we can escape the long trouble of the past 6 years. By recognising that we New Zealanders have one thing, and one thing only in common. Every one of us is marked out by the fact that we or our ancestors travelled further for a better tomorrow than anyone else on earth. You can check this for yourself, just look at the map, we're way up there. The pioneering spirit, that's the New Zealand spirit, and it brings a unity more powerful than any superficial divisions that people have tried to stoke. The scourge of identity politics that's pulled us apart is ebbing away. It's time for us to come together as a nation of problem solvers. And I said in my maiden statement that, quote, you can tell everyone everything you need to know about a person's politics by acquiring their sincere answer to a simple question. Is wealth a zero-sum game or not? 11 years later, I'd like to think my speeches are better constructed, but the basic point remains true. There are zero-sum people and there are positive-sum people. We face so many challenges after the Trouble. There's only 5 million of us, and we can face it divided by identity politics and the poison of the zero-sum mindset, or we can face it united in the belief that our challenges are very similar and one person's success can lead to another's. Being free and being equal is not just nice to have. It's actually the foundation for the problem solving we need to do as a country. And if we're going to succeed, we must first believe that we are free and that we are equal. That's what ACT will be campaigning to do from now to the next election. On every major challenge that this country faces, how to balance the books, how to be more productive, how to fix healthcare, how to make sure that we transfer real valuable knowledge from one generation to the next. In short, to ensure that this country really does deliver on the promise it's made to so many people who have come to these shores seeking a better tomorrow for themselves and their family. The values of universalism, of problem solving, of unity, of purpose, because each of us face such similar problems and have so much more in common than any superficial divisions sown by the scourge of zero-sum and identity politics. It's the people in this room to whom I'm most grateful for showing up today, buying a ticket and lending your voice and your support to make sure that this political project of making New Zealand the freest and most equal society on earth has real legs in the run-up to next year's election. And with that, I thank you so much for coming. I hope you're going to stick it together because we have a huge 15 months coming up ahead of us. Thank you very much.